The internet used to be a wild place. Some would still say it is, but for those who grew up with the internet in the 90s to early 2000s, it's incredibly tame by comparison. Information was truly free, and you had only yourself to rely on to find it and make your own judgment. This was a time before YouTube, X, Netflix, or Amazon, where the digital landscape was ripe for exploring and monopolies hadn't yet taken form to become the culture keepers of today. It felt like the majority of people online back then had to be intelligent, curious, or mature enough to even understand how to surf the web. Yes, surf. Not browse, surf. But nobody surfs the web anymore. Everyone is relying on their algorithms on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, or Reddit to feed them more content and provide them their dopamine fix. And with that top-heavy concentration of users only visiting a few select sites, I believe censorship and how that affects free speech becomes an incredibly important issue that I think society and companies as a whole are getting wrong. It's so easy to be online nowadays that even the most ignorant, stupid, easily manipulated people can find themselves among friends on every platform. This wouldn't be an issue if everyone used the internet like we were still in 2001, but the vast majority of users nowadays weren't around the internet then. Most weren't even conceived yet, and the other portion still use their index fingers to type www into their Internet Explorer address bar to log into Facebook. There does exist a group that is tech savvy, knows how to troubleshoot, applies critical thinking and logic whenever they're online, and knows their way around the web. But we are not the norm. We learn not to trust everything you see online, to always remain anonymous, and that Linkin Park hybridtheory.exe is not in fact 200 kilobytes. But the people of today didn't have to weather the trials to access all this information, and it has left them terribly unprepared. And that's a big issue, because the internet of today isn't a decentralized sea of information, but rather a kiddie pool that's always half full. With everyone being corralled into a few sites, grabbing people's attention on there is incredibly lucrative, both monetarily and culturally. This is where ads come in. Advertisement agencies were quick to transition to the internet, being one of the first industries that really understood and took advantage of this new digital world. Sites cost money to run, and the more popular your site, the more money the servers and bandwidth are going to cost you. In the old days of the internet, ad blockers were basically non-existent, and you had to trust the sites to not shove pop-up ads, phishing links, or onto your screen. And the sites that tended to respect their visitors with simple banner ads could actually make some decent change. But as more and more people started coming online, costs also began to rise exponentially. Advertising agencies understood that a free service would bring in users, but converting those users to paying customers was the biggest issue that a ton of websites and services struggled with. And so advertising became the lifeline for many sites. You could say that without ads, most sites, services, or apps would probably cease to exist. Advertisers know this, and it has placed them into an incredibly powerful position. They can threaten sites with demands for certain people, topics, or behavior to be censored, or risk losing funding. And this has happened before on both sides of the political aisle, on many different platforms. Anyone remember the adpocalypse, when YouTube was forced to cater to advertiser demands to push for family-friendly content? It pushed a ton of creators away, and it also shifted the culture of what was deemed acceptable and what wasn't. Instead of relying on people watching what they deem is worth their time and rewarding creators by watching an ad, YouTube was now changing their monetization policy and algorithm to please their advertisers' demands. And it wasn't just YouTube. Reddit, Facebook, and X also had their own run-ins with advertisers. But this seems to be shifting, and I really think it began with the Trump campaign. People's dissatisfaction with mainstream media and corporations at large was a huge rallying force behind Trump's success as a politician. And I think that constant force-feeding of ideology from the far left alienated moderates and those leaning right alike. They try to control people's opinions, dialogue, social norms, language, and culture through the lens of feigned oppression and victimhood. And I think Trump basically giving the finger to all of them emboldened people to finally speak their minds rather than be placated by the fear of being canceled or labeled one of the hundreds of isms the left loved to use. And it definitely emboldened one man that was once a beloved figure on the left, one that they believed championed progressivism: Elon Musk. When Elon bought Twitter, I was actually kind of excited. Twitter was a cesspool of highlighter hair and glossaries of pronouns. I refused to use it because any actual discussion was always derailed into the oppression Olympics, and the format felt like it really didn't encourage people to explain their positions. I had hopes that this would change under Elon, who was definitely more in line with my position on free speech than anything Twitter had resembled. The era of discourse definitely shifted that day, and I see no better example of the sentiment than when Elon decided to fight back against the advertiser boycott of X.
There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the order.
But those advertisers, I imagine, are going to say, we didn't kill the company.
Oh, yeah?
They're going to say...
Tell it to Earth.
But they're going to say, Elon, that you killed the company because you said these things and that they were inappropriate things and that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform, right? That's what they're going to say.
And let's see how Earth responds to that. We'll both make our cases.
Right.
And we'll see what the outcome is.
And guess what? He actually won. Advertisers came back after he called their bluff. They need his company just as much as he needs them. This symbiotic relationship has always felt one-sided, and I'm happy someone had the balls to remind them that they need each other to survive. You think advertisers are going to go back to cable television to advertise? Please, it pales in comparison to the reach that the largest social media and trending news platform will give you. At the end of the day, these companies only care about money, and none of them are going to take a financial hit over perceived good or values. If they did, none of them would be involved with China, India, Bangladesh, Mexico, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, or any other place where labor conditions are abysmal and exploitation is extremely high. Other companies have since followed suit. Meta recently restructured their guidelines, making them less restrictive. Spotify refused to deplatform Joe Rogan after some people were calling for his head, both online and internally, and I sense that this is just the beginning. I think this is a great thing, but it's sad that it's taken this long for people to realize that censorship is never the solution. As I've gotten older, I've noticed that a ton of people really can't handle words, especially words they don't agree with. We've created a culture online of echo chambers and self-censor sensibilities, and in these days of AI, it's only going to get worse if we continue to allow it. I'm going to use League of Legends as an example. I've been chat restricted in a game of League for saying playing AD carry in ranked is cancer, after Riot decided to implement an automatic AI chat filter. I've seen people get chat restricted for using curse words against themselves. And guess what? It hasn't stopped the League community from being toxic, and if anything has made it worse. It has caused an unnecessary amount of frustration that often leads to actual in-game behaviors that cannot be muted. If people want to mute, so be it, but it should not be the default mode of communication between players in online games. League has only grown since I first played it, yet my friend list has actually shrunk because I haven't added anyone since about a decade ago. People are afraid to banter due to automatic detection, and this culture of mute everyone at game start has ruined one of the most socially fun games that I've ever played. Were people toxic? Yes, of course. But automatically applying a filter to everyone instead of letting individuals decide on their own makes a big difference in shaping a game's culture. League's community has suffered immensely in part because of this. Nowadays, even the subreddit is all but dead, barring a few esports posts. And I get it, I'm a fan of the LCK and I'm a supporter of T1, but actual League content is in a dire state. Gone are the days of CivHD, Crazy Boris, Trinomortal.
He sent me to look at you! Get the fuck out of here!
Peace Pigeon. And even League's own Summoner Showcase.
That's a good way to cool off when the announcer is sassing you.
You have been slain.
Don't you judge me, disembodied lady!
What Riot Light, who was eventually ousted as a huge hypocrite, started with his online social theory of toxicity and how it pertains to League of Legends, eventually culminated to the hyper-offended landscape that plagues the game today, and it spread beyond the confines of Summoner's Rift. And while everyone will have a different tolerance before they choose to self-censor, I think the culture has made people's tolerance levels incredibly small, where even the smallest infraction earns a mute, ban, or ignore. I personally made lifelong friendships with people from this era, but I don't think that would happen nowadays because everyone is too afraid or demoralized to socialize. I used to see and hear all kinds of slurs in online spaces, from video games to forums, and I never felt like I had just been assaulted. I've personally been called slurs and been griefed online, but not once have I ever taken their words seriously. And no, I'm not justifying their behavior, but rather believe that everyone has the right to express themselves openly, especially online. Because at the end of the day, these people are random people that truly don't know you, so you shouldn't take their words personally. I was never explicitly sat down and taught this, but it feels like a lesson that many people didn't innately learn or have been missing in their lives. Maybe it's a naive thought, but I believe that people can learn to deal with words that may offend them instead of teaching them to report or make a scene of the situation. It is a longer, more encompassing solution than adding new words to a never-ending blacklist, or whitelist, whatever it is now. Every person, country, and culture have different ideas of what is offensive and what isn't. And as times change, all of these can also change. But if you teach people to accept that people will be different than them, mean, or even insane, then no platform will have to worry about creating wordy guidelines and policing their communities with a heavy hand. And if things really get too much, giving people the ability to self-censor should always be an option. But the core focus should be to learn how to exist in spaces with people you may fundamentally disagree with. I know people will misconstrue this as me saying that it's okay to be racist, homophobic, transphobic, or any other label used to attack someone's character. I'm not. But I don't think sweeping these ideas or topics under the rug is a solution. Historically, this type of censorship has backfired, and to assume we can do better now is just wishful thinking. It's better if discussion and topics are open to public criticism, allowing people to see the arguments on both sides. Good ideas usually rise to the top and withstand the test of time, and bad ones are ridiculed and remembered for their flaws. How it gets done is not something that has a simple proven answer, and may be a challenge, but it's worth an honest try. I think it's a long road ahead, but it has to start somewhere. I think what Elon Musk has done with X could be the snowball that causes the avalanche. I know there are still some things being censored on there, but it's so much less restrictive than Twitter ever was. And if you don't think it is, I'd say you probably share the same opinions that old Twitter did and would not need to be censored in the first place. I can't imagine how exhausting it must be to be perpetually stun-locked or triggered by anything you read or watch. This applies to both the extreme right and left, as it seems they each have their time in the limelight and headlines. Maybe honest and thoughtful discourse was never a real thing, and simply a byproduct of limitations that held back the majority of the population. Maybe people really do prefer to think with their feelings and with their brains, but I prefer to believe that I'm not an outlier, and that people can be taught to think critically and tackle things they may find uncomfortable and with a backbone. Now, how do we get about teaching the masses this skill? I think it starts with schools and universities abandoning the rhetoric of safe spaces, as if these places need to exist. I think it's more valuable to teach kids early about how to exist in a world full of diverse opinions and people. That not everything they believe is automatically true or correct, and that it's okay to be exposed to opposition. I also think the sentiment that people need to be protected needs to end. As long as everyone is allowed to voice their opinion, everyone is on an equal playing field. Lastly, and probably the most difficult, is to convince the general population that it isn't a bad thing to update their views if new information is presented to them. People will jump through hoops and unreasonable conclusions to defend their precious ego without ever really understanding what they're actually defending. Being able to understand one's ego and detach it from their reasoning is what makes confronting opposing ideas or attacks much easier. If we, as a society, manage to do this, I think it would finally turn things like social media and the internet into an overall unifying global force for good, rather than the propaganda and attention magnet it has become. We would learn how to benefit from the mass spread of ideas and thoughts and properly elevate society to new heights. If you made it through this whole video, consider liking and subscribing. It really helps a lot, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one. Rant over.